Israel said, not so. There's no crisis in Gaza. But the human rights organizations, the humanitarian organizations stepped forward to challenge Israel. Oxfam, it said, contrary to what the Israeli government states, the humanitarian aid allowed into Gaza is only a fraction of what is needed to answer the enormous needs of an exhausted people. The World Health Organization, it said, Israel is blocking vital medical supplies from entering the Gaza Strip. The International Committee of the Red Cross, which very rarely issues public statements, its modus operandi is to work quietly with governments behind the scenes. This time, the ICRC broke precedent, and it said the blockade of Gaza is having a devastating impact on the 1.5 million people living there. And at this point, a kind of strange debate unfolded in the media. On the one hand, Israel said, not true. We've not put the people of Gaza on a starvation diet. We've put them on a starvation plus diet. It's not as dire as the humanitarian organizations allege. The humanitarian organizations said, not true. You've put them on a starvation diet. And this whole debate shifted the attention away from the most fundamental point, namely, what right did Israel have to put the people of Gaza on any diet? Israel's sternest critics, Israel's harshest critics, they agreed with Israel on one point. They conceded one point. They said it is true that Israel does have the right to prevent weapons from reaching Gaza. It does have the right to prevent weapons from reaching Gaza. But that's not altogether obvious. If a people living under occupation have the right to use armed force to eject an occupier, then as the letter B follows the letter A, they must have the right to receive weapons to enable them to use armed force, to eject a foreign occupier. Some of you at this point might feel uncomfortable with that sort of language. We didn't come here to hear about force, murder, death, war. We came here because we're interested in peace and in a nonviolent resolution of the conflict. And I can be sympathetic to that. I can understand that. But if that's your point of view, the position of the organizations which conceded Israel's right to block weapons, their position was still hypocritical. Why? Well, after the attack on Gaza, Amnesty International issued a report entitled Fueling Conflict. And they said, under international law, it's illegal to transfer weapons to a country or a non-state actor that is a consistent violator of human rights. So Amnesty said, yes, Hamas is a consistent violator of human rights, but so is Israel a consistent violator of human rights. So under international law, said Amnesty, there has to be a comprehensive, total arms embargo on Hamas and Israel. It's fair enough to say that Israel had the right to prevent weapons from reaching Gaza, if you also say that we have an obligation to prevent weapons from reaching Israel. That's not rhetoric. That's the law. It also happens to be, as Amnesty International pointed out, it also happens to be domestic American law. On May 31st, another in a long sequence of attempts, or series of attempts, to break the blockade of Gaza unfolded as the Freedom Flotilla headed towards Gaza. We'll never quite know what happened on that fateful morning of May 31st, beginning at 4:30 a.m. But the basic picture is pretty clear now. The Human Rights Council at the UN, it mandated a commission to investigate what happened. I will not make any brief for the Human Rights Council. I think it is undeserving of respect, but it happens to be the case that the commissions they have mandated have consisted of respected international jurists, whether it was the case of the Goldstone mission or the mission that investigated what happened on the flagship vessel of the Freedom Flotilla, the Mavi Marmara. Time doesn't allow me to go into the details, but the basic picture as they presented it goes something like this. Israel began the assault on the Mavi Marmara with its Zodiacs, its inflatable boats, approaching the Mavi Marmara using stun grenades, tear gas, and perhaps plastic bullets. After that initial attack was repelled, according to the report, about 5 minutes later, the Israeli helicopters came in, and the report is very clear that Israel began to use live ammunition targeting the deck of the Mavi Marmara before any Israeli commando hit the deck of the Mavi Marmara. Live ammunition was used. By the end of the melee, 9 passengers aboard the Mavi Marmara were dead. 6 of the 9, according to the mission, 6 of the 9 died as a result of what they called summary execution, which is to say they were murdered in cold blood. Even if we don't know, and perhaps we'll never know definitively what happened in those hours in the Mavi Marmara, from a legal point of view, it's completely irrelevant. The basic facts are not controversial. Number one, Israel had imposed an illegal blockade on Gaza, a form of collective punishment which is prohibited under the Geneva Convention. Number two, Israel was causing a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Number three, Israel never made any claim or pretense that it was trying to prevent weapons from going to Gaza. It showed no interest in searching the flotilla's cargo, although it was invited to, and it didn't pretend that the boats were transporting weapons in Gaza, to Gaza. And now there's a basic principle of law, which it does not require a degree from UBC to understand. And the principle is you can't get a right from a wrong. If your initial act is wrong, as in you're imposing an illegal blockade, then you can't have the right to enforce, or I should say, you can't have the right to use force in order to enforce what's illegal in the first place. If the blockade is illegal, and there has been no dispute and no controversy that the blockade is illegal, then you had no right to use force in order to enforce what was illegal to begin with. You can't get a right from a wrong.